Let's go ahead and install the HB Industries modular selector kit into this Grand Power Stribog. Installation is going to be the same whether you're running an SP9A1 or an SP9A3 like we have here. The lower receiver is going to be the same between both models. To do the installation, we'll just need a couple tools: a 3/16 or 5mm punch, a small hammer, this one is 4 ounces, a small pry tool such as a pocket screwdriver. Alternatively, you could use a pocket knife or just a razor blade. And finally, we'll need a pair of pointed tweezers. You could also use a pick or a very, very small punch. The tweezers we find to be best for manipulating the springs and detents inside the safety selector assembly. The first thing to do is going to be to remove the lower receiver from the upper receiver. Check to make sure your weapon's clear. I like to leave the hammer back and engaged with the safety selector. So if your selector lever is in the fire or the down position, go ahead and rotate it up, leave it in safe. And using an armorer's block or a fancy blue roll painter's tape, support the upper receiver so that you can remove the takedown pins, these 2 takedown pins from the lower receiver. Grab your 3/16 or 5mm punch and tap out your receiver pins. They are retained in the lower receiver, so as you pull them, you'll hear a click as the spring engages the pin. Here we go. It's locked in place and won't go any further. Same with the rear pin, just pull it till it clicks. And at this point, you can pull the lower receiver down off of the upper receiver. Set the upper receiver aside. And I like to put the takedown pins back into the lower so it can lay flat on the table. I think at this point, I'm going to try to show you a better look at the safety selector assembly that we're going to be replacing. I always think it's better to kind of have a full understanding of what I'm getting myself into before I disassemble components. So in this case, we'll take a factory selector lever and we'll look closely at it to see how it works and how we're going to manipulate it to remove it from the lower receiver. Let's take a closer look. Inside the lower receiver, we'll have the safety selector assembly. This assembly consists of a center section or spindle between the left and the right side safety selector levers, 2 detents and 2 springs. When installed, the 2 springs are going to push up on the detents and engage the safety selector spindle. That will give you the click, 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 click that you hear between safe and fire. Go ahead and note the size of the components, just for reference while they're on the table. The springs, again, will be loaded and providing force on the safety selector spindle. So when you take your safety selector out of the lower receiver, keep an eye out for these springs and these 2 detents. It's a very similar setup to an AR style rifle. The main difference that you're going to see is this center section or spindle is unique to the Stribog. It is in fact a 2-piece assembly that is connected by a press fit square kind of pocket and post configuration. The reason this selector assembly doesn't just fall out of the lower receiver, is that these detents are actually going to they are clever. They retain the safety selector in the lower receiver. So on each of the 2 halves of the factory selector lever, there are pockets where the detent engages the safety selector spindle or crossbar and prevents it from sliding left and right. So in order to remove the safety selector spindle from the lower receiver, we're going to have to press down on the detents to disengage them from respective sides of the safety selector assembly. And with the detent pressed down, we'll be able to slide that side out of the lower receiver. For this side, we'll press down and slide it out of the lower receiver. By contrast, the HB Industries modular selector spindle is a 1-piece assembly. So on installation, we'll need to depress both of our detents and slide the selector spindle in place. After that, we can add or remove or reconfigure the two selector levers by just simply removing the torque screws on the outside. So let's go ahead and get back to the fun stuff. We're going to remove the safety selector from the lower receiver. Let's go ahead and remove the factory safety selector from this lower receiver. We're going to start by removing the right side selector lever. The right side is, in this case, identified by the two serial plates on the side of the lower receiver. And like we talked about before, we're going to need to depress the detent against the selector in order for it to slide out of the upper receiver. So identify your detent, and you can kind of test it by pushing down and feeling the spring pressure coming back against your tool. With the selector in the safe position, depress your spring and use your tool to separate the two halves of the selector lever. I'm going to go kind of slow here so we can kind of pause and take a look at it. As the selector levers come apart, you'll notice kind of here as it's kind of separating from the upper receiver, or sorry, you can notice the selector lever separating from the lower receiver. There is, again, there's spring tension underneath the detent that's pushing up against the selector lever. So my kind of favorite thing to do here is just to put my thumb over the selector assembly and pull the lever out. This kind of ensures that all the components, the springs, the detents are all kind of captured and stay in the lower receiver. In this case, and in most cases, the detent from that right side should come up and hit the spindle or crossbar. It shouldn't come flying out at you. The next thing to do is going to be remove this left side lever. Same operation. We're going to identify the detent inside the lower receiver and push down. While pushing down, we can kind of rotate and pull the left side selector out of the lower receiver. At this point, you should see two detents still inside the lower receiver. If the detents have come out, we'll pull them out real quick. The spring is underneath them in a pocket. You're going to reinstall them by putting the spring into the hole of the pocket and then putting the post down on top of the spring. And you can check that they're correct just again by pushing on the top and noticing the detent kind of moving up and down. So at this point, let's take a quick minute to kind of set these guys to the side, and we'll look at the modular selector kit that we're about to install. Inside the modular selector kit, we're going to have two thumb selectors, a delete cap, a center spindle, and then the mounting hardware and a Torx key. The center spindle will always, once installed, can just stay in the lower receiver, and to change selector levers now we'll just like any other modular selector kit, we're going to be able to take the screws in and out and swap the components left and right, swap the levers themselves left and right, and not have to worry about the directional nature of the factory spindle. The HB Industries parts are arguably made from better materials as well, so it is really a full upgrade. The way that I like to install these is actually going to be, let's go ahead and do the two thumb selectors first, and then we'll come back later and show you the delete cap. So I'm going to install a thumb selector on the right side of the selector spindle, and the right side is easily identified. You'll see there's an L and an R on the selector spindle, and of course that's going to correspond to left and right when it's installed in the lower receiver. With the R facing us, let's go ahead and put the thumb selector on that right side, and we're just going to go finger tight with this Torx screw by installing one lever onto the spindle. I'm going to be able to manipulate the lever much easier as I insert it into the lower receiver. So again, we're going to start on the right side and kind of slide it through the lower receiver. It's a little backwards because I'm rotating the lower receiver around to orient it to the camera. The selector spindle. We're just going to work it from in this case, from your left side to your right side. So go ahead and push down on your detent again and start the selector into the lower receiver. It should immediately capture that detent. Once you get the selector, try to show it here. Once the selector lever starts into the lower receiver, it's going to be a matter of kind of finessing it through the trigger group and the lower receiver. We've got a molded wall, sheet metal wall, a hammer, a sear, a disconnector, another sheet metal wall, another piece of molded plastic, and this entire bore is going to have to line up, and all these components will have to line up together with the safety selector as it kind of moves through and interfaces with every single component of the lower receiver, or I should say of the trigger group here. So there is no, I shouldn't say there's a right or wrong way. We're just going to use our tweezers or our tool to depress springs. You can also kind of push down on the hammer. You might push on the sheet metal trigger housing. You may want to push forward on the trigger. All these little manipulations are going to allow you to get the selector crossbar installed. So if you have a friend tell you that it's super easy, that friend is probably not your friend. They're going to be probably trying to set you up, because there is no easy way to do this or to make it look easy. It's just a matter of manipulating all the components until everything lines up. I have found that pushing the selector while in the safe position seems to be, for me anyway, the easiest way to get the components to align. Once, I guess you kind of heard it snap there. Once the selector lever, the spindle, is all the way installed, you'll be able to tell, because you'll have a selector lever on one side flush with the lower receiver, and you'll see the mounting provision on the opposite side. You can even manipulate the lever at this point. Once it's installed, you go ahead and pick your opposite side selector. In this case, we were going to go ahead and use a thumb selector. So install our thumb selector. You can use the supplied torque ski if you'd like. The torque spec on both of our screws is going to be 7 to 10 inch-pounds, or not more than 1 Newton meter. So once you have your levers torqued, you can reinstall. At this stage, you could also opt, so for example, I'm right-handed. I may want to just keep my thumb selector, and maybe I find that the right side lever interferes with my trigger finger. So if that's the case, quick and easy. Remove your thumb selector, install your delete cap, torque to 7, up to 10, not to exceed 1 Newton meter, 7 to 10 inch-pounds, not to exceed 1 Newton meter, I'm sorry, in torque. And now you have a delete on that side, while still being able to utilize your left side thumb. So at this point, the installation is complete for the safety selector. We're just going to have to reinstall the lower receiver onto the upper. So take down pins out. Installation is the same as it was when we removed it. Slip it back onto the upper. Reinstall takedown pins, and we can function check in fire. Check for reset. Trigger resets. Fires. Check reset again. And we'll go ahead and flip it up into the safe position. And you'll notice it doesn't fire. So at this point, installation is complete, and it's time to go out and enjoy your new safety selector options. Thank you for watching, and please never hesitate to reach out to us on social media, Facebook, Instagram. You can, of course, email us, call us. We're always here to help. Thank you for watching.